Hi friends! How is everyone doing? Fruity, welcome. Hello. Emmy, Travis, hello. How are we all doing? Really, Devo? Hey, I got Lamia here with me right now because she decided she needed to be snuggled right now. Look at her. Look at how happy she is. You might not be able to tell, but that's her happy face. Look at her little paws going. She is pleased. Ah! Kitten Lamia videos? Precious baby. She's been sleeping all day, and of course now that I'm like going live with the stream, she's like, I need attention. And it's like, I can only give you so much attention right now, boo. Alright, I gotta set you down. Okay? Diva will love you. She's mad. She angry. Hello friends, sorry, I started super late. Started getting ready super late, so I'm a little frazzled, but it's fine. Yeah, you should have made a cat seat, but you didn't. But you didn't. But yeah, the weather's been super nice here today, which has been like ultra lovely. I opened up the windows earlier, which was really, really cool, but now it's like humid up here, which is unfortunate. It's the only downside to being on the top floor. It's all the humidity decides it likes to be up in here. But yeah, glad everyone's doing alright. We're gonna do more Bloodborne today. I'm excited about it. I've missed Waluigi. I don't know that I've got much else to share. I am working on, like I said yesterday, I think I mentioned it yesterday at least, I am working on getting like a regular schedule out for early morning streams, on Tuesdays and or Wednesdays, but I don't know what time would work well for everyone else. You just gotta do it yourself, Emmy. Good job, good job. There's that good cat, see? Jody, hello, welcome. So yeah, I don't know what time would work well for like an earlier stream. I'm thinking either 11 or noon my time, so central. Doing like a 2 or 3 hour stream with like some point and click games. I don't know if that's something that people are interested in or want or anything. So let me know. Let me know. But yeah, hello Jody, welcome. How's it going? How you doing? Yeah, I don't got much else to say aside from that. So I guess we'll just do it. So what's this one piece of hair doing? What are you doing up there, bud? Okay. You're just gonna stick up. That's cool. Cool. Let me get this working. First and foremost, there we go. Oh, and chat shows up so much better on screen now. I fixed it. I did the thing. Is there the sound? Is that the sound? I think it is. Alright, so we're gonna try and beat Rom today. We're gonna patch in the doggo bed. Hey, as long as it works. I want your hat. Oh! Excuse me, I was looking at someone's fashion. Yeah, no, things that have zippers in them, miserable. We hate it, we don't like it. It's not fun, it's not great. But yeah. It's fun. I mean, it's exciting to work on stuff, though. Even if it's annoying initially. Good, I'm glad I'm not the only one who wants that hat. It was a good hat. I want that hat. So I have leveled up a few times since the last time we played. Excuse me? So we'll see... We'll see how that goes. I want to say I dumped some levels into... it is the 69. I told you it was worth waiting. I told you. Also, I am level 69 now. Nice. But I dumped a couple of levels into Blood Tinge and skill as well. As well as some more stamina and other things. So my arcane should be up now. I should be able to take a couple more hits, and yeah, I think we're good to go. Only one death allowed today. This is it. This is it for the rest of the game. From here on out, no death run. We're just gonna sit at a good 69 deaths. No, that's not happening. Also, where's Damien? There he is. Even if I wanted to, it wouldn't happen. It's not happening. Ugh, so many spiders. Glowbush, hello, welcome! Yeah, there's a lot of spidery stuff. How's it going? How are you doing? We passed 69. We have to go for 420. I mean, it will happen. Both will happen. We'll make it happen. Don't worry about it. Also, Damien, you're gonna get got! Damien, heal! My dude! I also forgot to turn on my captions! Oh, shit! Oh, no! I'll just run over here while I turn all this on. I knew I was forgetting something. There goes Damien. Damien is dead now. Fantastic. Oh, I'm sorry it's been a day. Hopefully it's all handled now, or will be handled sometime soon. I'm doing alright, all things considered. It's been a very lovely day. Oh no. Oh, there's too many spiders and no one to distract them. Okay, well... I needed to not jump into that. But guess what? Guess what that does? Are you ready? Nice. Hold on, we just gotta check it out. Check it out. Nice. Yes! Yes! Get it, chat! Alright. Well, that means we gotta kill Ron now. No more messing around. I can't afford to get Damien in here anymore. I have no more insight. I've done it bad. Also, Jag, hello, welcome! Oh, I got a flyboy on me. Shoo, fly. Now that there's more people here, how is everyone doing? How's your day been? For those of you who haven't had a particularly great day, I hope it's better now. Yeah, like I said, everyone let me know kind of like what y'all think about me doing like a slightly earlier stream in conjunction with our evening stream as well. I say evening. It's evening for me. Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. I'm doing pretty good. It's been a mellow day. I've been here for it. Tired. I'm still very tired, but that's what happens when you've got insomnia. Please don't smush me. Ugh. I need... These would be non-secret streams. I'll still do secret streams, but secret streams will probably be like Tuesdays and Tuesdays and Thursdays, since I don't have big things planned that day. We'll be doing some kind of cosplay sometime soon. We do have... Oh, I should... I need to pay attention to what I'm doing. We do have the cosplay stream community challenge that we're trying to get enough points for. There's a spider in ROM. Don't be in there, buddy. Emmy, Jody, thank you for the contribution. We're very, very close to that. And I'm very excited about that once it comes time for it. Because I know you guys are going to get it. You're going to make it happen. Fruity, thank you for the contribution as well. Heck yeah. I'm trying to be better about, like, remembering that we have these things going on. So that I can remind all of you more regularly. Rom, what are you doing? Rom, what are you doing? Ah, butts. Okay, 69 is for the deaths, but it is now gone because we've hit 70, not 790. That's too many. It is ruined. I'm sorry. I did it bad. I got distracted talking. We did it. We did it bad. Hold on, let me just make sure that I've got everything set where it needs to. Right, 420 here. Let's go. Let's go. We're on our way. Give me a few more times with Rom and we'll be very, very close to it. I don't remember Rom being particularly hard. I want to say the first time that I got through Rom, I, like, beat her in, like, 2, maybe 3 tries my first time. I think I just got lucky, though, honestly. Devo, why do you cry? What? You wanna come here? You wanna say hi? Come here. If you're gonna do it, you gotta do it now. I can't have you jumping up on me in the middle of a boss fight. Come here! Kimberly, hello, welcome! Come here! Devo! Hey! Hey! No. You don't get to cry and then pretend that you weren't there. You have to say hello. It is a cat. It's Devo. He's gonna pretend that everything is terrible, even though he's very happy and he's purring. Can you say hi? Can you actually say hello? Huh? Yeah? Mwah. Get out of here, buddy. Devo update for Annie. You do that. He is ferocious. More so than normal. I don't know what's gotten into him. I think we've got a couple of mice in the house, and he is on it. He's also just been super whiny the last few days, like more so than normal. Like he usually just cries, but this is like he's been plaintive about something, and I have no idea what, but he's good. He slept with me all night, the other night, which was practically unheard of after, or like after that first week that he got back home. He like just has not been sleeping with me at all, but he slept with me all night the other night, and that was precious, until he like kicked me so that I was like sleeping sideways, essentially. I had to like break my back to sleep with him next to me because he has to be on me. Ridiculous child. Hi! Yeah, I'm talking about you! You're so silly. Kimberly, thank you for the contribution to the cosplay stream. I super appreciate it. Yeah, no, he's been being silly. Can you stop? Hey! None of that's for you! He's like chewing on the corners of my desk. Can you stop? Hi! Where's your brother? Where's Mork? You can go bother him. No, he cannot. He's just like, pay attention to me. It's like, Devo. Devo. Hey, don't. So if I die to Rom again, can we just blame it on Devo bothering me? I will always bring Mork into this. Don't jump on me. Stupid pumice stone faced spiders with their silly little waddles. It was definitely the cat, 100%. Travis said I could call him in if I needed to, but I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and do this on my own. I just need to focus. I need to stop being distracted by things. How's it going though, Allie? How are you doing? How are things? Oof. Yeah, this is gonna be rough. This is the rest of the stream. Just me dying constantly to ROM. And not even ROM proper, it's just gonna be all the stupid spiders. Call for silence like speedrunners do. I mean, you'll see me like super into the zone and I'll just like go silent. And then occasionally yell at stupid spiders for hitting me. Like, hey, don't do that. Glad you're doing good though. But yeah, talk amongst yourselves, chat. I'm gonna hiccup and try and beat this stupid eyeball spider. It's gonna be great. Don't even worry about it. Lime Octopus is for having 2 months? 2 months worth of being a sub, I believe. Is it 2 or 3 months? Emmy, do you remember which one I said it to? 'Cause I don't. Yeah, so for the longer you're subbed to me, the cuter the octopus gets. The octopus is just poorly. Get that octopus to a hospital. Why are you spitting on me? Stop! No, so you should have an octo, I think, because you have yours set still to first, the octo just doesn't show up at the moment. But that just, I mean, being first is cool too, you're one of my first subs. So, like, you know. I think you can choose which badges show up, by your name, though. Yeah, Emmy is wonderful and has done all of our emotes. Can we not with this stupid fucking arcane attack? Emmy's made all of our emotes and our channel badges. 'Cause she's super talented. Hey, can you not with that? Can you not do that multiple times, please? Freaking no! No! Get your ice out of here, Rom! Freaking stop! Okay, alright, Rom. I'm gonna need you to not do that anymore. I don't like that attack. Fucking hell! Oh, okay. It's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. Our Yasi mode is very, very good. Technically, Emmy still made it because, you know, it's her face. Rom, my dude. Was that one from Abe? It's a good one. I appreciate it.
Shush, everyone be quiet to let Kaysh focus.
Thanks, Allie. I appreciate it. We got this, though. It was better. We're doing better. We're getting there. Progress, right? I want to summon Damien, but I only have the 2 insight, and that's not great, because I don't have any Madman's knowledge on me, and that's a problem. I did tell everyone to talk to each other. Just no direct questions at the moment. Just watch me get super focused about everything. It'll be fine. Fire paper's not gonna do anything. Alright. I did like clearing out some of these spiders, though. It kind of helped not having nearly as many around. So we'll keep doing that. We'll just make that happen a few times. No, stop. Haha! Mobile has saved me for once! You and your disguised distraction. Alright, hold on. Let's just get in here. Should we just get in here? Let's kinda hack and slash our way through a little bit. Woo! Alright, alright. It would be a lot better if I could keep an eye on Rom at all times. Even when I'm going after these spiders. Alas, I cannot. Okay, let's... Frick. Oof. I just need these gosh darn spiders to stop jumping on me. Please and thank you. Oof. What was that? Can you not? Alright, there's all the old ones taken care of. No, I'm not happy about that attack! Please stop. Oof. While I did level, I did pick up a ton of blood vials, though, which is nice. So I shouldn't have to worry about that too much, I don't think. No, come on. Stop! I just want to kill the spiders. What's this? Madman's knowledge! I don't know. This should be the last... its last teleport, right? Ugh. We're just gonna take our sweet time with this fight, you know? We're just not gonna worry about it. Alright, well, I would much rather get rid of all the spiders now while I can. So, I'm hoping that this is more Madman's knowledge, please be. Don't jump. Hell yeah. Perfect, fantastic. No! Don't thrash around. Stop. 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 I need you to stop. I need you to not do that anymore. Oof. Is it that easy to just become a slug? Because that seems preferable to this freaking fight right now. Hell yeah! Hey, we did it! Hi, lady. Hold on, is there anything else down here? Nope, alright. Alright! Fuck yeah! I just had to focus. Take care of some of those spitters. Hi, lady! Also, you get to hear that good sound. Yeah, I did! Y'all can talk? No one was stopping you from talking. Grip it and rip it! Man, I hate it when the moon baby comes down and says hi. It's so needy. No, Mod Moose forbade it. I said no direct questions towards me, though. No, we're good. We're good. We did it. We're ready. It's fine. It's fine! Look, it only took us 72 deaths to get through ROM. It's fine. At least 10 of the- oh, hey, amygdala. Where am I? The ritual secret broken. Seek the nightmare newborn. Well, answer. Yeah, roof squid. It's an amygdala. Oh, I hear a baby. Excuse me. Nightmare. Nightmare. Nightmare! Stop! Moving! I don't need these. Sir. Can y'all stop shooting me? Let's just go in here. Thanks, Abby. But yeah, roof squid. Alright, I know where we are. This is open now, though! Oh, right, aren't these... These are the respawning enemies, though, aren't they? Yarghoul! Because they don't give me any blood echoes, so, like, what's the point of killing them? There is none. Where's the bell lady? What's over here? Ouch! 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 There was a terrible noise. They don't stop coming and they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. They don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. They don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. Cool. Let's go back, because I don't think we've, we still haven't beaten Parl yet, have we? But I vaguely remember how to get to him. Also, it looks different here now. That's a problem. Parl. With A's, not Pearl. Or Pearl. Parl. I love that Pearl has also just become a thing that we all know and recognize as well. Parl. I gotta find Parl. Ash and Hunter gloves? That's not right. I need Bone Ash. There we go. The boniest of Ash. It's Pearl now. It's not, though, because we got a Pearl. Hold on, let's... Can I... Still cannot fortify anything. It's unfortunate. We did get some new stones, though. Nothing worthwhile. Man, I love it. It's great. Not the threaded cane. Where's my madman's knowledge? Gimme, 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 gimme.
Of the moon, of the dream.
Who's Flora?
O little ones, O fleeting will of the ancients. Let the hunter be safe. Let him find comfort. And let this dream, his captor, foretell a pleasant awakening.
Yeah? Hey, I am standing right here, ma'am.
Welcome home, good hunter. I must have drifted off.
No, you were...
Very well.
Can't just act so casually about that.
Become your strength.
Parl! There's a dead human in our house. Parl! I can't level up just yet. But... used to gain unspeakable blood echoes. What exactly is unspeakable about them? 20,000? Okay. Alright, maybe I'll be able to level up twice then. Hey.
Welcome home. What is it?
Hey. I want to level again. What do I want to do? Yeah, that's fine.
Farewell, good.
I don't... Something tells me I don't need to be this high of a level to beat Parl. But that's fine. We'll do the thing. I know I was, but I have to level, Fruity. I'm sorry. Ah, dang! I'm like 500 short. Hold on. Can I sell anything? How do we make this happen? Yeah, sure. Take those. That's fine. But now we can shoot for level 420. Hear me out. I don't think you can get that that high, but we can try. An attempt can be made. I can probably get one of these levels to 420. What does this do? I'm still short. Oh, because I needed 5,000. Well, that's a problem. I don't want any of this. I'm so close! Is that enough? That should be easy enough, right? I mean, I can definitely get to 420 Waluigi's. It will happen. By the end of this game, we will be up in the triple digits.
Welcome. Very well.
Are we good now? I'm literally 30 blood echoes short! Come on! Doll, look, I'm good for it. Can you just... Ugh. I just don't want these blood echoes to go to waste, you know?
Welcome. What is it?
Okay.
Very well. Let me.
Let's do skill. Okay. Gotta go find Parl. Parl! Oh god, where was Parl? I want to say in the Forbidden Woods somewhere. Just kind of a problem. We'll just get to everything to 420. It's fine. Parl's in the gall. Oh, in the jail. I always want to say. I know how to say it. I just refuse to. Hyper-realistic dank smokers for you. Oh no. This hurts me. Wait. So I can't get to the jail, apparently. Which is kind of dumb. So I guess we gotta go through where we're going through now, and that makes me upset. This is unfortunate. Oh, well. Oh, hey, Amygdala! Oh, look at you, big boy! The biggest boy! Also, what is the sound? All them. Look at all these big boys! They're really gross. Don't shoot me. Ugh, okay. Chonk. 2 is too many. I think 1 is too many, honestly. Ouch. I want to say where do I get the Kayshurrr summons from? That's my question at the moment. There she is. Because, like, I want to say I've been able to do Kayshurrr at this point previously. Get out of here, sirs. Don't you get the summons at Bergenworth? Or is it in Yusufka's clinic? Oh, jeez. Yeah, things definitely get, like, extremely blurry from here on out for me. As far as what I'm supposed to do and where I'm supposed to go. Can you stop shooting? Stop it. Stop it, sir. Oh! There's more of you. It's not safe at Yusufka's clinic. I know they keep saying it is, but it's not fruity. I'm sorry, bud. Would anyone like a peanut? It's a good movie. It's a very good movie. Say, then immediately you hear everybody just gooping. Who is doing that? Are those goopy boys? Is this the jail? Hey, big boy, I'm gonna need you to not for a minute while I go and attempt to kill your lady friend. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. Ha! There's the door. Sirs. There we go. I'll like her. I like what she does. Or anything involved with these ladies that summon guys. It's not ideal, to say the least. Hey, buddy. Oh! Alright, where's big boy? He's still over there. Come here! Can you come through the door? You absolutely cannot. That's fine. Excuse you! Wait! No! No! Shaun of the Dead or Hot Fuzz? Both for different reasons. You can't compare the two. I know they're part of the same trilogy and all that, but you can't compare the two. Kayshurrr summons is allegedly with Yusefka. Okay. Well, what level are we now? 71? I think I'm a higher level than the other character that I was playing recently that had the Kayshurrr summons. Is that a thing we want to try and do? Can you not? Gotta pick one? If I had the one that I would keep is probably Hot Fuzz. Just for the, you know, for the greater good and all that jazz. I think I quote Hot Fuzz more often than I do Shaun of the Dead. Hot Fuzz because Timothy Dalton. It's a good reason, honestly. Yeah. Of course you do, Emmy. This is my shocked face. Okay, can we... I was gonna say, at this point, I think she'll let us into the clinic. Travis. Yeah. So that's where I stand on that. I also have a weakness for geese. So, you know, Hot Fuzz has me there as well. Ooh. Sounds like you've got new homework to do, buddy. I know there's a way to get into Yusefka's clinic from the back. Oh, Yusefka's not here anymore. I genuinely don't remember how. It's fine. We'll figure it out. Yarp? Yarp. Narp? Alright, now I want to watch Hot Fuzz. This is what y'all have done. This is... Maybe that's what we'll do on Saturday. No, we talked to- oh no! Jody and I were talking about watching, or doing the next Bad Ben movie, on Saturday. Because we, like, still haven't done that, and I don't think setting up a marathon for that is, reasonable at this point. So we might just have to do a Bad Ben film every once in a while, which is great, because you don't need to have seen any of the other ones to laugh at how bad they all are. Well, look, we can do Bad Ben this weekend, and then Hot Fuzz the following weekend. That makes my life easier, because then I don't have to make choices last minute, because I will. Does someone want to give me a hint as to how to get to the back of Yusufka's clinic? We need to all somehow work. It's alright, Andy. It's just bolognese into our collective vernacular. Yes.
Hey Travis, food is ready.
The way she said that, it was very kind but very sassy. Watch yourself. Kimrold is not holding back anymore. I still have like these moments when I see like the bits message pop up that like it's not gonna work, and I get very excited and very happy when it does. Hi, Devo. Yeah, apparently, I mean, I like interpreted that very differently. Stop! Bud, you're fine! Oh! Oh! Gilbert, no! Gilbert, no! Yeah, top of the stairs of the clinic are still closed. Gilbert, no! I don't want to kill you! Goodbye, friends. I'm not gonna kill him. I refuse. He's my good close friend. I don't I don't wanna. Aw, it's like one of my favorite vines though. Good close friends. Oh, it's a good one. I'm sorry no one understood. It's like me being like, alright, that's it, get on the fridge. A lot of people just go like, what? The poison lake attached to the forbidden woods that you that take you to the back of the clinic? Okay. Yeah. I remember the poison lake, and I remember getting there, and then immediately, like, leaving. Because I was like, yeah, with the derpy giants. I remember it. I don't remember how to get to it, but I guess we'll figure it out. I want to do Kayshurrr. I don't think I ever finished Kayshurrr, honestly. Because I got there and dealt with those stupid little mosquito ticks. Yeah, both. In fact, I'm pretty sure that is kind of what I said. Just, that's not what we're doing today. Hello, local Octo. How's it going? Welcome. But yeah, I pretty much just like saw the poison lake and was like, no, I don't think so. But I guess we gotta. I mean, we don't gotta, but we gotta. you know. So I guess we'll do it. Because I would like to do Kayshurrr. Like, actually and fully. I think I got up to the boss at Kayshurrr and then was just like, we're done. It's miserable. Okay, but now to find where this poison lake went? Can I go down there, or is that death? That looks like it would be death. It was towards the beginning of the forest, though, wasn't it? That's a very far drop. Stay there, Snackman! Get out of here, Snackman! What a chump. Facts, though. It's the bad Medusa? Instead of stone, it's just poison and stun locking. And no one likes that. Device not currently operable. Have I? It's more Todd Snackman! No, you were too far away! Oh. Woof! I need to go. Oh, we need to leave. Like, now. Yeah, I did it bad and didn't trigger that elevator. Okay, we're going down here! Snackman is following me! Sir! No! Oh no! Yeah, we're back at the Snake Woods! Aren't you so excited? What's that place? Oh, hi, buddy! That'll 100% distract- Are you shitting me? I am the rat now! Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness. I did die! Thank you, Hemi! Yeah, he was like, I'm coming for you. It's like, can you not? I'm dead already. And I don't even get your souls! Echoes! Whatever. I hate the woods, and I mean, as most of us do. This is like the beginning of the woods though, right? I just want the crows to stop. Oh, did it again. It's fine. that was a terrible one. Basically, yeah, no, the Forbidden Woods are the worst. I hate them. I hate them so much. But I'm determined to get into Yusufka's clinic and to get to Kayshurrr. This is all I want. This is all I want in my life right now. Yeah, let's claim those 200 echoes. That's fine. I mean, if you like living dangerously, picnic here would be perfect, honestly. I like not getting poisoned while I eat my potato salad, though, so... Just me, though. There's stupid traps. The traps everywhere. Oh. Come here, bud. I want my whirligig. Now. I would like it now. I want our silly little weapon now. Hi, crows. Get out of here. Get out of here! Go! Be gone, sirs! Alright, I can at least take him down fairly quickly now, which is nice. It does get rid of some of the awfulness. Really, at this point, it's just a matter of not getting lost every 10 seconds. Kill everything, then picnic? It's a lot of work for a picnic, but you know, I'm here for it. Oh! A thing! Hi! Hey, look! Hey, look! Hey, look! I'm gonna need you to not do that, sir. I mean... Octo! Thank you for the follow! I super duper appreciate it. Oh, this is the front of the village. Okay. Okay, I see, I see. But yeah, thank you, I appreciate it. Is this where the poison lake is? Look at this guy thinking he's being silly. How did you do that? No, 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 no! I need you to not smush me. Please and thank you. Ugh. It's not this far in though, is it? Oh!
Hey, Travis. The tots are getting cold.
Travis, it sounds like you need to go eat. I fell into a hole. Also, why would you ever let your tots get cold? Right? I want some tots too. Go eat your tots, man. Hello? I hear growly boys over there. Oh, heck. Well, we did know this. No! 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 So the water is flammable. Remember that? Hey, remember that time we were looking at it, and I was like, "That looks like it could be flammable," and then we just didn't bother with it because it was fine. Well, it's flammable. But what if I want some Toda? Oh, is it dog jail? Is the entrance is near dog jail? Okay, I can make my way to dog jail. Oof. Oh, hiccups. They were. Dog crimes. It's real. Wait, is it Witch's Abode? No, from the bridge lantern. Oh. You don't know that, Fruity. In fact, I can almost guarantee you that they are violent dog offenders. There's a second dog jail in the Forbidden Woods. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Let's go back. We'll go back to the Forbidden Woods. We'll hug the left wall. Travis has gotta go get his tater tots. Cause you gotta, you know? Potatoes. Thank you, Abby. Yeah, like little, they're like hash browns, but like in a little bite-sized bit. Tater tots. Have you never had tater tots before? What's taters? Precious. Boil them, mash them, put them in a stew. What? Taters? Okay. Said hug the left. Hug the left. I mean, honestly, that just sounds like fruity advice, but I'll do it. I'll do it. It's not this way. Never heard of them. Do yourself a favor. Next time you go to a grocery store. They are an American phenomenon, but like, you gotta. They're so good. I'm gonna find a tater tot recipe so that we can all make tater tots at home regardless of where we are in the world. Because tater tots are a miraculous thing that we all need in our lives. Love me some tater tots. That's not dog jail. They're delicious. I mean, it's basically just like a fried potato. It's very good. For what? Can someone... Alright, I realize Octo's not in the Discord at the moment. We should first off resolve that. But also, can someone post what tater tots are in the Discord? Just like a picture of them. You know what? Actually... Oh, nope, that's a dog. That's a dog. Dog, I was gonna hide in that corner. Because fried foods are the best. Everything is better when it's fried. Well, pretty much everything is better when it's fried. Yeah, potato croquettes, basically. But smaller. More bite-sized. Is that a tater tot picture, Emmy? Oh no. Oh no. No! 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 I don't even have my antidote out yet! Fucking hell! Oh, this is a problem. Google said they're potato crunchies to people in the UK. Does this help? Right, it does sound super cute. Alright, come here, bud. No! I don't need two of you on me! Please, please, please! Fucking no! This is a bad day! This is a bad day to be a hunter! Oh, okay. I think that's made up. I mean, technically, everything is made up. If we want to get, like, super deep about it. I just don't want there to be snakes anymore! Tired of these motherfucking snakes in this motherfucking poison lake. Oof. Alright, it does sound like potato crunchies is made up, though. Unfortunately. Can we just start calling them that, though? Because that's a cuter name than tater tot. Fantastic, thank you, Emmy. But yeah, if if anyone in chat isn't part of our Discord, you can follow that link and hang out with us after stream. We do fun stuff, like movies on Saturdays, and occasional secret streams. Are they snakes or parasites? Yes? Both? Why not both? You know? Where does this go? Is this where the clinic is? Please tell me this is where the clinic is. Oh! It is! Shortcuts! Shortcuts! Remember them crawling out of the giants when they die? Ew. I mean, there were some of them around before killing any of the giants, but, I mean, parasites can hang out before crawling out of the things that they're infesting. I prefer to think of them as snacks, but, you know, that could just be me. Alright, what awful, terrible things live back here? Oh, a goopy boy! Hi! I can't afford to give you any of my insight, so... Aren't they, though? I love hash browns. But yeah, tater tots are basically just hash browns, but smaller and more compact. Yeah, hash brown babies! That's a good, yeah. Yeah. Yeah! That's not incorrect! Oh no. Ah, freaking crows! Okay, it's fine. We can handle them. Come here! Come here! Please? Don't let that be a Valheim situation. Compacted hash browns. Baby hash browns is still precious. I do genuinely want to call them potato crunchies though. Like I like that. Just crunchies. Can we just call them crunchies? We're having the real conversations here. Asking the real questions, really diving deep into the important things in life. Like hash browns. Alright, we made it to the clinic. Hooray! Not made of squash, though. Had to be compacted to set up the pun. Squashed, as in squished. It's very dark here. And that upsets me. Hold on, I think Yusefka's up there. Well. Fraud-Sefka. Potato product classification should be a master's thesis. Aww, mushy buddy. What's this? Communion. Alright, it's very, very dark in this clinic. Yusefka, how'd you get any work done when you couldn't see? I swear, I went into a couple of morgues that were like this, where it was just dark, and I was like, can we not? Can we have some light? I can't see what I'm cutting. PhD in potato. You said the little girl here, she'd still be alive. I mean, we've had this discussion. It was either a matter of she gets gobbled up by a piggy right quick, or mercilessly slaughtered by my hand, and I don't want to have kid blood on my hand. What you doing over there, ma'am? Hey! Hey, what's up?
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast.
I mean, morticians might be scared of the light, but what about medical examiners?
That's awful. But
Man, I hate having godchildren.
don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
Just recovered from the crazy party.
God, I'm nauseous. It's
I don't think I've ever seen her like this. When you're hungover and drunk at the same time. I think she's got too many eyeballs in her head. I just remember, like, showing up here and her, like, attacking me a bunch. Which wasn't great. Do I just put her out of her misery? Yeah, do I stab her? Is this what we all want? Do we want me to kill her? Is this the actual Yusufka?
God, I'm nauseous. It's progressing. I knew it. I'm different. Oh, God,
Yusufka's nice and safe here. That absolutely means I gotta kill her then, right? I got 1/3 of umbilical cord. Oh, look, she's sleeping. Allegedly. If she's nice, I gotta do a murder. We've established this. Yeah, well, I can't say I'm a monster, but, this boy sure is. Look at her precious Waluigi. Why? It's okay. I'm doing her a favor. Nobody wants to give birth to a terrible eldritch monster. It's fine. Oh, you still got people hands! It's our beautiful child. Don't apologize. I was about to say Waluigi's done nothing terrible. No, he definitely has. 100% has. Look! Look! It's the real Yusufka! Ma'am! Ma'am! Did you know? There's an imposter here. Hey! Nah, you're gonna attack me. Okay. Look, I was willing to, like, let you live. But now you get to be a mushy friend on the... But... I guess I already have Yusufka's blood. Seek pale blood to transcend the hunt. Is me. I am the pale blood. And now we're back at the beginning of the game. Yeah. Alright. The summons. Where is it? Always seeking pale blood to transcend the hunt. You gotta. You know? You just gotta. Stagecoach leaves from Hemwick Crossing. Let's go there. New Game Plus, make better choices this time. They do got that jiggly brain. It's pretty great. It's like a lava lamp, but it's self-contained. That's pretty cool. I'm alright with that. Oh no. It's at Hemwick Crossing, right? Let's go to Hemwick Charnel Lane. Go check it out. See what's happening. What all is going on. It's like a lava lamp, but is your friend... Are you not friends with lava lamps, Fruity? Buddy, what did lava lamps ever do to you? Well, since it's dead, that just means it's gonna jiggle more, right? It feels no love. You don't know that. Ma'ams? Knife Grandma? Knife Grandma? Hey! I would appreciate not getting stabbed, Knife Grandma. Same question that I asked last time. Are you a Knife Grandma or are you a Hammer Grandma? Hammer Grandma. Hammer Grandma. Or, are you a Molotov Grandma? I'm def a Molotov Grandma. I don't know about y'all. Hey, the elderly started it. I'm just ending it. It's just a trench coat full of hams. I tell everyone I cleared the first shop of Game Boy Hattress. You did not. But have you beaten Hattress? But have you finished it entirely? What are you gonna do when you become the Hattress champion? Like, what more will there be for you to accomplish? Look. Why you gotta have such a wide sweep, buddy? Alright. Is this the crossing? You gotta do it. You gotta beat all the Hattresses. Them's the rules, Fruity. No, Grandma! Fuck! No! It's a 3-hour run of Hattress. Oof. Don't you on the other hand me. Look. There were too many dogs and I panicked. Okay, we'll just run there. It's fine. Yeah. Heck, your octopodes can, space travel? 'Cause I'm here for that. I like octopus. Are you and Emmy the same person now? Is this what I'm hearing? Ouch! Freaking dogs! Freaking dogs! No! I need to leave. I need to leave. Oof. Alright, we got this. Yeah! So Hattress is this game that Fruity likes. That's basically Tetris, but with hats. Um, I mean, sure. Is this not where I use the summons? Aight, cool, solid. I love it. I love this for me. You know what this town needs? Signage. I need to know where I am. Dude, I was behind you. Please. Somewhere is a carriage. We'll find it. I just, again, like, it says, like, it's at Hemwick Crossing. It's like, cool, that's fine and all. Where is that? There are no signs here. Sounds like when Emmy was stuck in the windmill and Grandma kept killing her and pacifying. The cougar sounds. I like how we're still sticking with this whole we killed her thing, even though we didn't. Oh, Hulk, Grandma. Hulk Ma. Hey, y'all got a carriage up here? Hey, y'all got a carriage up here? I don't think it's up here. Where did you come from? Oh my goodness. Okay, we got this. Was a lot of grandma carrying going on. Is the monolith the bus stop? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not happy. There's a grandma up there. Grandma! Have you seen a carriage recently? I need to know how to get somewhere. No! Kayshurrr came with a base game. Apparently I just needed to wander around a little bit. Okay! The Hunter's DLC, you have to get nabbed by an amygdala. Which, I mean, we can technically go check out now. I think I have access to it. Yeah, no, Kayshurr's base game. We gotta go there for Alfred. Because we gotta go find Logarius? Look at the horsies! Pet, 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 pet. Good, weird dogs. Get into the carriage. Let the weird dogs lead the way. Yep, gotta get a squid hug for the DLC. Gotta let the squid guy just go blep. Please try and refrain from hugging the squid. Big squid boy does not appreciate it. As much as we would love to show them some love. It doesn't go great for anyone involved. Oh yeah, look at the cutscene! Heck yeah, let's go to terrible Kayshurrr. It is Logarius that's here, right? Am I remembering that properly? I constantly get Logarius and Ludwig mixed up in my head. To the point that I can't tell you which one's which. Oh, that was me getting insight. I was like, what is happening to me? Insight. Insight is happening. More eyes on the inside. Okay. Heck yeah! What's over here? Let's immediately go the opposite direction of the castle. You know, because why not? It's not operable. Alright, shortcuts. That we cannot use at the moment. That's fine. Where are those awful tick things? There it is. Look at that. Look at that terrible, awful creature. Come here. No, you're just a little too high up for me to hit you. Look, can you not do that? I'm gonna need you to stop, please. Barf. Oh, yeah, they're not great. They're very not great. I don't know that the wacky hammer can reach. I know you just want me to use the wacky hammer, but this thing is so slow. And these boys got such a big reach. Look, look, look. Stop, stop, stop. No. Yeah, I'm better off not hammering. You can dare me all you want, Emmy. If it did a substantial amount of damage more than what I currently do, probably would do it. It does not. In fact, I think it does less than what I normally do with just a very fast attack. I swear it's a wacky hammer only challenge. No. Can we not? Open! It's cold! If y'all want to see a wacky hammer only, maybe that could be our next community challenge. You've done a wonderful job! Oh, you're still not dead. Alright. Whack. Good night! I need to equip this bad boy again. Okay. It's not... Madman's knowledge. No! Murder ghosts! I forgot about these ladies. I also, like, don't know the story behind Kayshurrr. Why are there so many? And I'm very curious as to why it sucks so very bad! Who's crying still? Who is still doing a cry? Kayshurrr swore they did it very bad. So they kind of just sucked at everything. Mistakes were made, and then more mistakes were made. You know how it goes. You do it bad once, and then you just continue to do it bad. It's fine. Wait, which part of that is you, Emmy? There's another lady. Oh, okay. I was gonna say there were a lot of things there that you could be like me at. I just wanted to make sure. Hey, stop crying. This isn't the place to do it, ma'am. It's not great. If you're gonna do it somewhere safer. You know? They did it bad and doubled down on doing it bad. Aww. Well, it's a good thing you got us. I mean, at least you don't have like a ton that you have to do at work then. Oh! Silence. Oh, never mind. Alright, where are you? Look, I see that your friends are trying to rush me. No! And it worked. Your friends did it. Here you go. Wacky hammer. Yep, does a lot less damage than my normal attack, and that's extremely unfortunate. Oof. Weren't they like trying to do their own blood rituals? Fucking hell. You say I tried. It looks like I managed to do it. Are you gonna attack me, little bud? Well... What? No! Devo, why you gotta cry? Quick, set up a secret stream. Just go through all of the Dark Souls lore, like, I mean, I guess, you know, Dark Souls and Bloodborne, just, yeah, just explain it. Explain all of it. How bad did everyone do? And why did they continue to do it bad? I need a doorway. And we're crying! Perfect! No, ma'ams! Someone is walking very quickly and I don't like it. Ugh. Alright, where are those terrible, awful flying gargoyles? So it all started with a bad understanding of English and a love of fantasy novels. They took everything very literally. Ma'am. Tell me I'm a pretty princess. Oh god. Look at me! Look at me! Oh no, the blood on the neck! I thought it was a choker, but it's just blood. The hair is still perfect. It's very good. I'm a fancy lad. What can I say? Oh no. Do we keep it on? How bad is it? It's very bad in relation to, like, everything. Well, okay, I take it back. Arcane's not terrible with it. Surprise, Waluigi is always wearing heels. Always. Seriously though, where are those terrible gargoyles? There you are! I see you. No! I don't like these sounds! Yeah, they do! The Resident Evil 8 gargoyles still remind me of these things. And I hate it. I hate it. Same bud. Yeah, no, these are definitely worse. I can see him over there! Sir! Facts, though. Travis does laugh at his own jokes. It's very good. Hey! I like that they put their butt up in the air. Why don't you fly, you loser? No, I almost had him off the edge! Dang. Oh well. It is almost that time, isn't it, Emmy? Excitement! Buddy. Buddy. Wait. You're not a gargoyle. Ouch! Sword lad! Give me the blood vials. Ooh, we're not doing too great. On vials. Well, I mean, I guess I'm only at 15. That's not terrible. Isn't there like a library area? I see you, boys! Alright, well that's one less I have to deal with. God, stop! I don't like you screaming at me! Excuse me? Where'd it go? Did I not get a hat with it? I don't appreciate them yelling at me. Where's the crying coming from? Is it in here? There's the library. Shortcut! Dying! Shortcut opened, back up we go. Gotta keep making bad choices and press on, you know? I could just send this down. Because I know I'm gonna be coming back that direction. You're back where you started. New game plus plus. So much plussing. Hold on. Whoa. Whoa! 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 No! No, ma'am! No screaming! What is this mark on me? Yikes! Everything hits so hard! Ouch! What are you doing? Don't bow! Now is not the time for that! Or are you're like spitting blow darts at me or something. Get out of here! My goodness. Okay, okay, look, we're locked on and you missed! No! I hate goblins! Now we're up to 77. Alright. Oh god. 8 deaths today. It's good. It's a good time. It's a very good time. No problems here. We got it. I did send the lift down. I was smart. I thought ahead. I knew it was gonna happen. And there was no way you were gonna have me run through this freaking castle again. Also hiccups. Oof. This was a little trick I picked up the first time I played. It is a rough game. I have fun with it though. I don't know. I like these kinds of games. As frustrating as it can be, I find that once you like get through the section that you're struggling with, or you know, manage to beat the boss that you can't quite easily get past, it's just so fulfilling. Mark is put on you by darts. Makes the ghosts very angry with you. Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Good to know that, like, I mean, it just pulls aggro, basically. That's what I'm gathering. And I assume it, like, buffs them, or makes me weak to them, so they hit a little harder, which is extremely unfortunate, because they already hit very hard. But that's fine. I can work with that. Alright, buddy. Use the wacky hammer more. Noted. That's why they were hootin' hollering? That would make sense. Well, unfortunately for them, I don't like darts. So I'm gonna have to pass on that. But, you know, I appreciate them inviting me. That was kind of cool. Ugh! Many boys! Many boys! No! There were like 50,000 blood echoes there. Oh. Maybe I just run through. Maybe I just don't worry about the stupid gremlins. Maybe we just get past the dumb gremlins and see what's beyond there. And then once we know, we can determine if we need to continue to run past them. Thank you for trying, but it was not. It's fine. I think I can get that amount back fairly easily. I mean, not super easy. Can you not? Mark means they scream at me. It's fine. If you say so. What's this over here? What's this? Oh, there was a thing! What is this? What is this? Oh! No! Okay. I thought I did it bad. Oh, I I had hoped he wasn't gonna notice me. It's fine. It's fine! Wait, did this just send me back to the first floor? It did. Oh, fuck. Why don't you have a head, ma'am? Oh, everyone is so angry. Executioner's glove. No, we're not doing this blow dart nonsense. Everyone is so mad. I'm dead. I'm absolutely just, we're dead. Or we're not. Or we're not dead. She has she was scream. Oh, Knight's garb, Knight's gloves. Cool. I don't want to be here anymore. I would like to leave. I've bothered you all enough. Let me get out of here. Maybe, please. I would like to leave. There it is. There's the exit. I found it. Wait. I have to go through here. Alright, if y'all could just come out here. You're not wearing them in the customary manner, but they do have heads. But is it their head? I mean, I guess if they've got it, it is theirs, technically. Alright, look here. I'm gonna get shot by the dart again! Stop! No! I don't like it! Every Tuesday they swap. It's like, you know, the Hatter's Tea Party. Trade places! But it's their heads. They trade heads. Yeah, that was a little whack. But that's fine. We got it. I want to get back down there because there's that shiny thing, but I don't know how to get out of that room. And that's kind of a problem. It's very easy to change your mind. Very good. You did it good. Stop! I need everyone to calm down. Oh goodness. Where the heck am I going? They're also angry down there. I can just hear them like, "Ugh!" constantly. Look, I need you to stop with the blow darts. Okay, that's the window that got me in trouble last time. Ouch! Where the heck? That's the way I have to go, right? No one knows. No one knows where we're really going. Alright, look, bud. Look, buddy! There is no left-hand wall for me. No, stop, stop, stop! Oof! Alright. Let's go ahead and heal up. I would love it if you, like, locked on. Thank you. Okay. That's one dark guy taken care of. I need both of you to not come over here. Actually, if you could just, like, not, that would be cool. I would love that for me. I was locked onto the wrong one. No, no, no! Oof. Alright, that's one down. Stop! Stop running! That's not nice. Alright, that's taken care of. Thank you. But yeah, basically, we'll just wander around and be like, oh! That's where we are! That is usually how this goes, you know. Oh, we missed. Oh, we missed. That's fine, he missed too. That appears to be a staircase over there, right? Now, the real question is, can I get there? That's a lever. That's a ladder. That's a window that I don't think I can get in through. But it is on the same side as this window. Is this really where I'm supposed to go? Okay, let's just not do it bad this time. A whole heaping lot of nothing. Oh! Well, that's the window. But, it's not open. Let's just take care of him real fast. Just real quick. Just like, hey, don't mind me. Okay, so we gotta be in here, right? Fucking hell! Stop! Oh, I was so close! Thought I heard someone crawling around out here. Come here! Oh my goodness. They're so grumpy! Looks like someone needs a nap! Fuck! No! No! Oof! That stun that they do lasts so long! Long enough for them to be able to get like 2 swings in, and they don't even swing that often. Gosh dang it. Yeah, I mean, it's the one with the head off, but like, that stun lasts so long. It's miserable. Like, you get in there and it's really hard to tell, like, which ones are which, because they're just everywhere. Oof. Alright, let's... No! Ma'am! My goodness. It's easier said than done. I just want to get down there. Like, how do I get to wherever it was that I saw? I don't know. We'll figure it out eventually. Stop! Terrible creatures. Bam! You know what? Even when I'm not locked on, it's just miserable. 'Cause then I'm just slashing somewhere. And the camera is still arguing with me. No, 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 no. No! Okay. Come here. Yeah, I don't know how people play without lock on. Stop! Dang it! She just like spams it. Okay, stop! I get it, you hate me. Fun fact! Right back at you, kids! Gosh. No, she's not down yet. Oh, but he is. Okay, alright, cool, alright. You know what? This is fine! This is fine. No, that's a valid assumption. Like, how do you do it? There are a couple of times where it's like, I can manage to do it without the lock on, but for the most part, I have to have it, because otherwise I'm just aiming at nothing. Even if I think I'm aiming in the right direction, I'm not. Oof. No, we're just, no, we're not gonna deal with you and your stupid blocky nonsense. Alright. Hand lantern on. How do I get out of here? I mean, big slow things are easy to get around. Like, Cleric Beast was pretty decent without the lock on. The only time I really used it was when I was throwing Molotovs. And then Amelia was okay not using lock on all the time, but it was still helpful to like get me oriented properly. Yeah, heavier weapons it's easier to do, but freaking stop. There. Okay. Now what? Well, it's because, like, with a lot of the, like, big, slow bosses, they're, what you're aiming onto is so high up that you can't, like, you're not gonna hit that point anyway. And so if you're standing under them, you just kind of twirl a lot. And that's unfortunate. Alright, so why did I clear this out? You and that Moonlight Greatsword. Did I see an elevator somewhere? I saw stairs in the main room, but I couldn't get to them because there was a wall in the way. I can hear someone walking over there. So how do I get up? Because, like, the other problem is, where I am currently, there's no way to leave here. Oh, there is! Never mind. I've done all that for nothing. Well, not for nothing, but... Who's stomping around? Is this what I saw? I think it is. I think it is what I saw. It is. Oh. Hello? You wanna come here? Come over here, away from the man with the darts. Oh! I know where we are! Alright, it's the main room! Like, right where our elevator drops us off. So we just gotta run across the room, and instead of going up the stairs, we, go up the ladder. See? See? We got this. What do we got here? Warm blood gemstone. Alright. What else we got? It's down here. You did call it. You know what's up. You know how these games go. Nightmare! Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Give me your chunk. Give me your chunk! Cyril! Hello! Welcome! How's it going? How are you doing? Hello? Oh! Whoa! Whoa! What hit me? Is it a dart? Oof. But yeah, how's it going, Cyril? Can someone give Cyril a shout out for me? Everyone's so excited to have you here! But yeah, how's it going? How are you doing? Where am I going? Thank you, Allie. More bug snacks! Bug snacks! Oh, you look angry! We've got to go for the soft underbelly. Aww. It looks like Peaches! Oh no! I got the Nightswing! Travis, we can match now! I love it. Please tell me Peaches isn't this gross, though. Oh! Okay. You're not wrong. It's not incorrect. I mean, it's... Looks like I've got a dead rat on the back of my head! What? It's good, it's good, it's good. Where the heck am I supposed to go from here? Over there? What about the side top hat? There is no side top hat! I don't have a side top hat! It might be for ladies only! I am upset. I am upset! Also, Cyril, thank you for the hydrate. We'll stop right here. Y'all can, look at this beautiful mug and a shrimp check. Oh, God. Self-care check. We should, like, do that as a package redemption at this point. Alright, shrimp check. Hydrate. Where's my water? There's my water. My big old gallon of water. Great. You still got popsicles? Jelly. Big border bortle. Do I go down here? I'm gonna do it. We're playing that fun game in Bloodborne now where it's like, is this an intended path or am I cheating? That looks like an intended path over there, though. What's over here? Got anything fun over here? Absolutely not. Thanks, note. Oh, God. Hope you don't mind heights. Boop. Right, is this progress or will I die instantly? Have we done it very bad? No, I think we've done it properly. I remember there being roof traversing. Oof! Oh, I think this is the boss! Waluigi in the game perfectly perching. Waluigi parkour! Oh! He's very nimble. So fast, so flexible. So light on his toes. All 7 feet of him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is the boss. So that kind of sucks. It is what it is. Oh god, hiccups. He also does arcane attacks though, doesn't he? Right, Swig is at 60. Okay, we'll keep that on, and then we'll go back to... What's Executioner Garb at for Arcane? 110? Knight's Garb is 140! Ooh. That is Arcane I'm looking at, right? No, Star is Arcane. What am I doing? Gascoigne is at that. Student uniform is 140. Hold on a second. The Knight outfit? Knife? Knife? Hold on. 60? Okay, and then I gotta find better pants. Student trousers. Students are apparently well defended against the arcane. I look like such a fucking nerd. Alright. Alright. Let's go. Let's do this. Like I said, this is Logarius, isn't it? Harry Potter Nintendo crossover. It's off-brand Harry Potter. Which I guess is the better Harry Potter now. What Hogwarts house is Waluigi in? Obviously the snake one. Clearly. I almost called it Severus. I think you mean Slytherin. That's me. That's me. Oh, hey, bud. Alright, can we make this quick? Buddy? Buddy, old pal? Hey, friend! Forgot all the Harry Potter stuff. Valid. Martyr Logarius! Oh, my face itches! Logarius, give me a second! Give me a second! Buddy! My face itches! Ouch! 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 I get to go in a barrel and be in a barrel. Why are you in a barrel? Devo, now is not the time, baby! Oh my god. Do they? What? What? You're so loud. Hi. You're so needy, Devo. Maybe they have a barrel-shaped dorm behind a barrel? What? I mean, that sounds very Hufflepuff. What? What? I don't know if you can hear him. He's very loud. I mean, it honestly, it tracks. I can see this. Oh my goodness, stop screaming at me, ladies. Every test that I took from the official to like the offshoot ones, I have gotten nothing but Slytherin. I am forever a Slytherin. Well, was forever a Slytherin. And then we found it. And then we all realized that JK is a terrible human being. Hey, where am I going? Up here. Here is where I am going. Up the stairs. Oof. Can we... Look, Logarius, I get wanting to live in your own little tower away from everybody, but can we do this in a place that's a little less terrible? A little easier for me to get to. Like, I know you're there now, bud. Let's just make it simple for both of us. Did I? I don't think I increased our counter. Now I have. It's happened. Right? Like a pulley. Let's just get a bucket. Let's just get a bucket and tie some rope to it. We'll lower it down from your place, and I'll just hang out in the bucket, and you'll pull me up. And I know it's a pain in the ass, but, like, honestly, it'll be a lot better for both of us if we just make this a little more direct, you know? It's okay, Fruity. We forgive you. We just don't forgive them. It's like, you've gotta have better things to do with your time than, like, worry about what's in everyone's pants, right? Logarius, I need you to not be so quick and have so much goddamn range! Alright, where did he go? Look! Look, bud! Look, buddy! You and your stupid faces! Oh, this is bad. Stop! You keep jumping away from me right as I get up on you! And I need you to not do that, okay? Alright, it's not very fast, but like... Lock on! Oof. Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. Can I push him off the edge? Hey, remember that time we cornered an old man and just beat him senseless? It's good times. Sir. Sir. Look, this is not going great for well, not either of us. Definitely just me. I've already gone through over half of my freaking blood vials. Fucking hell. The wacky hammer has a little bit more range, and it doesn't do nearly as much damage, but I don't have to like get up into his face. But I think I've determined how far I have to be away from him to actually do the attack. Oof. Nope, 82. It's the gun hunter situation given with wizard skulls. Miserable! Those freaking skulls, man! And it doesn't, again, like, it doesn't help that he just, like, he's so jumpy! Constantly so jumpy. You can't knock him off the roof? Dang. Alright. Well, then I won't attempt to try. Because I thought we got real close that time. It looked like he was gonna fall. But it's fine. Oh my god! Stop with the freaking darts! I appreciate you letting me know, though, because I definitely would have wasted a bunch of time trying to push him off the edge. Stop! I hate them to... I hate that the sound is, like, glitching while they scream at me. And I mean, at this point, we could just continue on with, like... with, everything else. But I'm kind of, like, into trying to beat Logarius now. Because we still got Parl we gotta find. Parl! But he's through Yargul, isn't he? That's what we determined? Parl! Not Porl! Parl! Is that a big 4S camera or a business suitcase on your back? It's a business suitcase! I deal in pain! Smashing is my business. Yeah, it's just a big fuck off hammer, honestly. Wha-bam! It's very good. Oh! I should have gone and upgraded it! Because I think I can do that. We should probably return it. We're not returning this lab. We will face the curse. Alright, Logarius, look. You've been martyred once. Can we just do that again? Freaking get in here, and you immediately destroy me for half my health. Only big hammer? I want to see if I can manage... Freaking hell. Dude! He'll never run out of skulls! Never! Ever! Not ever. He has an unending supply of skulls. I guess I could probably use the blood of Adela. That does heal me continuously for a bit. Could try it. Hold on. I do want to go back and upgrade my wacky hammer, though! Because I think I have enough chonks to do that. Should probably also repair it. And I think I've gotten a couple of new gems for us to check out. I'm not talking to you, doll. I'm busy. I'm doing hunter business. Fortify! What is this? Oh, I need blood echoes, don't I? That's a good thing. I still got some cold blood. Let's fortify. That looks kind of cool, though. What is it? Like, what are you? That tells me nothing at the moment. Get that going. What else we got? Not a ton. It's a gunblade. Oh, okay. But why would I want to be like Squall? But like, what good would that do me? What's this? Is that a way of saying it'll make you sad and you want to use it? Oh, fuck. Guess you could say shots fired?
What is it? Very well. Let me...
How much do I need for 30,000 to level up? Okay.
Farewell.
I was just checking. Is this not Kayshurrr? Forsaken Castle Kayshurrr. Yeah, I guess I should ask you guys. Do we want to keep trying to beat Logarius now, or do we want to start the DLC? Because I think we're like in range, like close to like the recommended level for it. It's up to me. Alright. We'll try one more time, and if we don't get... Excuse me, I sent you down. We'll try one more time. I mean, I'm not gonna get it. Let's be real. Oh my god! Elevator! There you go. I just want to land a couple of hits. I would like to feel good about my ability to hit. Freaking... Stop! I hate it. Stop! Stop! Are you shitting me? Alright, you know what? We're just gonna go. Sorry to cause you ladies all these issues. I'm just gonna leave because honestly, fuck that. The DLC is where the pizza cutter is, and I want it. So let's go hang out in the DLC area for the next 30 minutes. I was willing to give Logarius another shot, but I'm sorry, if they're gonna knock me off the ladder, no thank you. I'll come back. Alright, let's go to the DLC area. Debating playing Final Fantasy VIII on stream because it's one I played a lot as a kid. Never got through it though. I mean, do it! Do it. Play it. Make it happen. I haven't played a ton of Final Fantasies. I got through 10, and then I played Dissidia. I got through a portion of 7. Played a little bit of 10 too. And I think that's about it. No, so the issue with 7 was the fact that I got through, like, I got up to Sephiroth killing Aerith, and immediately thereafter, the emulator I was playing on decided to get rid of all of my save data, and I was, like, 40-some hours into the game. Like, I had played for 40-some hours, and had, like, done a bunch of grinding and all that shit, and at that point I was just like, alright, I'm done! I'm never coming back. So, I never came back. It was miserable. It was terrible. Okay, where the heck... I know I think it got just before... What is it? I mean, I'm sure 7's great. I will never play it again, though. Is it the Cathedral Ward? You like 10-2 or 10-2? No, 10 was alright. Titus, whoever that kid is, awful. Just so dumb. Like, the definition of himbo, and it was great on its own. I like 10 more than 10-2. It's valid. I only really liked 10-2 because of Pain. She was my girl. But yeah, I mean, that's more or less the extent of my Final Fantasy stuff. I tried 14 for a while and got so bored. So bored. Yeah. That's about it. I don't know. I don't dislike Final Fantasy, but it's not my thing. I don't enjoy it a ton. Oh no, are you okay? Hey.
There you are.
Yeah.
Forgive me, I'm a bit out of sorts.
I mean, everyone loves chocobos.
So,
I mean, that's fine. I didn't want to ask you for your blood, ma'am. Are you still laughing? There's an event going on for Final Fantasy 5? Why are you laughing? Get randomly signed for 4 job classes by a robot and have to play through with only them. 4 job fiesta. I'm good. I'll pass. Oh, hey, buddy! Is it... It's down there that I get snatched, right? Yeah, it's like I said, I don't like have anything like against Final Fantasy or anything. It's just it's not for me. Let's get got. Oh, is it over here that I get got? All right, let's go. Thanks, bud. Frenzy.
Curse the fiends, their children too. And their children.
Look at him. He yoinked us. But that's okay. This was a consensual yoinking. I am allowing it. We will accept the yoinkening. And now we'll end up in the Hunter's Nightmare, and it's gonna be great. So I have played the very, very, very beginning of the DLC, but not much past that. So the DLC is pretty much All new territory to me. Oh, look, it's one of the goopy boys. I think that's a beard, not tentacles. Whatever. So yeah, I've gotten up to the top of these steps, and that's about it. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Hello? There's hunters. Hunters everywhere, and that's unfortunate, really. New goblins! These ones are scared of me, though! They don't want to fight. They just want to be. Just let them be. Oh, there's a hunter up there. Okay. New goblin drop coming in. Hot new goblins. Sir. Oh no! Alright, look here. I need to put on different armor because I realize I'm built for Logarius right now. That's a problem. No, we'll keep the Knight's Wig on because it's a very good hat. Yeah, you got range. You got range for days. It's a little bit of a problem. Bone ash armor. I am wearing my nerd boy pants. It's a problem I got. Not for long though. Let's Hufflepuff barrel garb. Basically, yeah. Okay, now we're not dressed like a nerd boy. We're dressed like a fighty boy. Ready to do a fight. Freaking dogs! I want to log on! Let me log on! No, dog! Oh god, everything hits so hard! Never before seen dog content. It's not the dog content I was hoping for. Doggos don't like the gremlins. Doggo's gonna do a farm for me? Oh no. Oh no! You gonna fall? Oh, now there's two boys down there, and that's a problem. Yeah, the dogs are not good boys. In fact, the dogs are quite the opposite of good boys. What's over here? Aside from stupid crows. There's a shiny and I missed it. I don't like that I can't kill these guys in like one hit now. It's a little upsetting, honestly. All dogs are good boys except the cop dogs. These are cop dogs. Very much 100% cop dogs. They are not good boys. Oh, that scared the shit out of me. Oh, I know where this is. Okay, but listen here. These dogs suck. Look at these boys. Look at these gremlins. They scared. These are the new dogs now, okay? Look, if the dogs didn't attack me, I wouldn't have to do a murder on them. But they do attack me, So I have to do a murder on them. Them's the rules. I'm sorry. Oh! Hi, sir. Can I have you not? Look, boys, I saved you! Don't swarm me. Well, I didn't save you from that, but you know, it's how it goes sometimes. No! Big man! No! I didn't hurt you though! Oh, scream! Is that the gunblade? It very well may have been. I don't know, whatever it is, I didn't like it. Also, I think I missed this the first time. Is this the like, well, maybe not the cleric beast, but a cleric beast? Got the eye pendant. Look at him. He thirsty. Silly boy, that's a statue. You can't get water from it. Oof, miserable. Okay. He is the cleric beast. Ah, shit. I missed! No, just stay out there. No, just stay back. No, just stay out there! Is this far enough away? I'm not here! Forget about me! Hell yeah. Does he have eyes or just the one cosmic galaxy in his face? I mean, it's lovely either way. It is pretty. It's purple. It's my favorite color. The perfect beard to grab onto you. I don't think that's how beards are supposed to work. Okay, bud. Alright, buddy. That is a terrible amount of damage. Oh, God. I don't like his beard. Jesus Christ. That hurt. Stop! Oof! Big boy Angie. I mean, I got what I needed from in there, so I can move on, I suppose. Yeah, past this, I have no idea what's around. That's it. That's all I knew. So yeah, from here on out, I don't know what's coming. It's gonna be great. Hey, can you not... Look, buddy. Hey, guy? Jesus Christ! Stop! Jesus, they hit so hard! Why does everything hit so hard? I don't like it. It's not nice. They're not nice. They're not nice. How? Okay. Listen here. Travis saw me get through this area the first time. It wasn't great, but it wasn't this bad. Why isn't my character that's higher level than my other one is doing so bad? It's fine. It's okay. I gotta figure out where the heck to go. No, I don't want you here. Gentle Hunter, I need you to leave me alone. Thanks. Is he still freaking following me? Come here. Come here. No, come here. You wanna do this? Let's fucking do this. Come on. Oh, you're killing my buddies. Well. You did it so bad, my dude. Look, they're all alive. He wasn't hitting them. How did he do it so bad? I don't think... What's up here? Is it just an item? It is. Do you just call me old blood? Well. Well. No, don't fall. Don't fall down there. Or actually do. There's a thing. Useless. A useless thing. We'll just go. Don't worry about it. Hey, Gremlin, I need you to let me through. You know what? Sorry, Gremlin friends, but, like, it's gotta be this way, apparently. How much did they give me? 200? That's not ideal. Wish it were more. Beast Cutter. That's the long one, right? Man, these hunters are aggressive. Oh, this was just sitting in the corner. He's put himself in timeout. No, you weren't supposed to turn around. No, get away from me. I don't like your hammer. Fuck! Cool, 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 cool. He really did. He was like, actually hammer. No, actually hammer. I was like, alright. I guess I'm dead now. Whew. Maybe the DLC wasn't a great idea. I don't need to kill any bosses to get to the pizza cutter. Okay, but where is it? Alright, I guess the better... Do you know its location? Don't necessarily tell me, but do you know its location? Do you know how to locate our big wacky pizza cutter? Alright, bud, let's not say we did. Okay, it's hella far away. As long as you know where it is, you'll be in charge of making sure I don't miss it. Gonna do what I can to, like, you know, check for it. Gonna loot all the bodies, but... We know me. I think I'm being thorough, and that I'm very much not. It's an ongoing problem of mine. Alright, I don't like that you're killing all my buddies. Remember key. Oh, he must have killed whoever had my blood echoes. This kind of feels like a dead end. How? Where? Oh, freaking doggos, no! Stop! Ouch! Why are you so mad at me? I've done nothing wrong. Okay, but if it's anything like the other location, there should be a means of going somewhere over here. Heck yeah, look at that! Found a tunnel! Would love it if I found a lantern too, though. Just saying. That looks miserable, first and foremost. No! Who's shooting me from over there? Oh, that gun! That gun's shooting me from over there. Fucking hell. Oh! Alright, I might have to... yeah, we'll call it here, because we're 4 minutes till 9. I'm gonna have to level up a bit over the next day. Yeah, there's gonna be so many Waluigis in this area. It's gonna be extremely unfortunate. But you know, that's fine. No. I don't remember it being this difficult on my other character. Granted, it was just like the first little section, but like, I want to say my other character's like level 63 or something like that. And I could get through pretty decently with that, but I don't know, whatever, we'll figure it out. I'll level up a bit more. Try and see if I can figure out how to get past these boys, but I won't progress any further, since that's how we do. But yeah, we got through ROM. That's great. We love that for us. Oh, hiccups. Fantastic. Let's see who is streaming at the moment. Yeah, Rom's rough. Again, I don't remember Rom being that difficult, but we got through it. No! Never apologize, Cyril. I appreciate it. The lurks help, and it's totally understandable, and I get it. We love having you here, though. Let's see. We've got Goldar doing some crafts. Kayshurr's playing some Apex Legends. Game Mod is doing some Fortnite. Princess Meezy's playing some Overwatch, and Huchu is playing some Resident Evil 7. Yeah, you weren't even that lurky. It's fine. Do any of those sound good? Does anyone have any suggestions? What do we got? What do we want? What are we feeling? Otherwise, I can look up somebody else playing Bloodborne. That's always an option. Otherwise, let me look to see who's playing Bloodborne real quick. Quite a few folks. Yeah, I mean, you need to go to bed. Go to bed, Fruity. Here, let's go hang out with, let's go hang out with Kayshurrr. I haven't seen them in a minute. I should make that a thing. But yeah, so let's go hang out with Kayshurrr for a little bit. Thank you everyone for being here. I super duper appreciate it. It's always nice to hang out and chat and just generally cause chaos with everyone. I don't know why this is off center, but it is. Wednesday we'll probably do a little bit more Bloodborne. I am going to, like I said, I'm planning on doing like a couple of streams on Mondays and Wednesdays. I'm just trying to find a good time to do that. I'm thinking either like 11 or 12, do a 2 or 3 hour stream then. If people have a preference, let me know. Like I said, that time will probably be dedicated to like point and click horror or just mellow mystery games. Nothing super intense. But I think it would be nice to just like kind of do a bit more, because I'm finding that my days are open a lot of the time, but whatever. We'll figure that out later. Anyway, let's go say hi to Kayshurrr. I love you guys. Take care. We'll see you Wednesday. Mwah.